All right, let's see if we can get Facebook coming in here. And then we'll get going for the show. Maybe. 1 and 2. There we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome into Building the Broncos. Tonight, I get the great pleasure of being joined by the great man, Erick Trickel. Nick had a little bit of an emergency to head off to, and Erick thankfully was able to step in. And man, it's been a little while since we've done a show. I guess probably the draft was the last time
Yeah,
you and I
I
were
think
on
the
a show
draft was the
together.
last time we've done that, and that was the group one. And then before that, we're probably looking early last season, I think.
Yeah. So
Like,
no, I'm
it's
excited,
been a
man, to
while.
have you in here. Get to talk some winning Bronco football once again, which is
Something
just
we've
pretty
never really
awesome to
been able to
see.
do.
No, yeah, Nick and I were talking about the other day. We've been doing this since December of 2016, and that was pretty much when the Broncos started going downhill. They had a winning season that year. They were 9-7, but the end of that year was terrible. That December
Mhm.
was terrible. So, yeah, to be talking about Broncos being competitive here in December, most people thinking good chance that they're going to be able to go to the playoffs. So, yeah, no, it's exciting to get to talk about that. And Broncos made a couple moves that might make an impact coming down the season here to possibly add a little bit of talent. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But Erick, how's Alaska out there, buddy?
It's cold. It's very cold, and when the heat doesn't work in your office, it gets even colder. So I've got a heated blanket on my lap and trying to stay warm a little bit. And before we go on, unfortunately, I won't be able to be here for a full hour like most shows. Tuesdays are D&D or family night, so I'm going to jump out of here, but about half hour or so. But I'm excited to be here, and as you were saying, talking winning Broncos football. Unlike you and Nick and most of the other guys at My Huddle, I was here. I was covering the Broncos started in 2013, right before the 2013 draft. So I got to cover them for the Super Bowl run. I got to cover them for those couple years of Manning, and it was just great. And then dealing with what we've doing, I'm not sure what's worse, not having that Super Bowl season to like where you're covering the Broncos and coming in on this losing thing, or having that and then having to deal with this near decade of losing.
Yeah, I was middle school when the Broncos won their back-to-back Super Bowls. And that was when I was just starting to get interested in football big time. And I was kind of like, man, is this how it always is? I quickly found out it is not like that on a very regular basis. I've got some Patriot fans that I talk to on a regular basis, and they're like, man, we got to party for 20 years. And now we're dealing with the hangover. And I was like, that's what we dealt with for 8 years. So thankfully it's only been 8 years, but somebody that doesn't give us a hangover is David coming in with the $5 super saying, good evening, Broncos country, Nick, Carl, and Deacon Scott. Hashtag 10 and 7 plus. Hashtag let's go Bo. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag book 'em times 3. Hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Good to see you, David. Thank you for coming in with the support. And yeah, I mean, it's great. There's so many good things going for the Broncos right now. Defense looking like a top 5 unit. What's the point that we can finally say Bo is the franchise quarterback?
um I still think it's a little early for that. I think we're getting closer. And I did an article this week that, I mean, I was one of the biggest pundits of Bo ain't it prior to the draft, just to put it simply. And I did an article this week that was talking about the 3 main reasons why I felt that and where I went wrong on my evaluation for it. So we're getting closer to that point of calling him a franchise quarterback. I think he's showing a lot of steps to become that guy. We still need to see him with how he handles pressure against a really good defense. And talked about this last Friday, and somebody brought up the Chiefs defense. Well, the Chiefs defense wasn't able to get a whole lot of pressure, and it's not the Chiefs defense isn't as strong as they were last year. And then we saw early on in this game against the Raiders that Bo was struggling against the pressure they were throwing his way. He found a way to overcome that, and they stopped throwing pressure as often, and we saw him reemerge. So I want to see more consistency from a technical standpoint when it comes to handling pressure more consistently. And that is one of there's a few other hurdles, but that is the last major hurdle he has to, jump over for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, like I said, we're getting closer. We just got to be careful because there are those 1-year wonders
Mm-hmm.
that come into the league, light everything on fire, um, and then burn out real quick. You know,
I mean,
RG3. Now that was a different situation.
yeah.
RG3 kind of after his rookie season, he's coming back from injury. And but before we get to talk about that more, we got David coming in. Thank you, David. Good to see you. Saying good evening, Carl and Eric. One, what makes the 2024 Broncos different than last year's team that fizzled down the stretch? And two, how is Bo Nix's rookie year more encouraging than Gardner Minshew's? Let's start with the first one. I'd say one, the defense. You've got a true number 2 cornerback. You've got guys up front that can win one-on-one battles. You got a safety pairing that is playing lights out for you. Like just the entire unit is playing as an entire unit. The other thing I would say is that makes this a little bit more sustainable. You've got an offensive line that is playing like a top 3 offensive line in football. And they've got a quarterback that knows how to use them. You know, part of the issue last year, you think of like that Patriots game. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy running wide open on one play. And what does Russell Wilson do? He does a 360 spin into a sack.
Mm-hmm.
Like he saw him. He even pump faked towards that direction. And there was nobody within 10 yards of him. And he doesn't throw it. Yeah. Bo Nix isn't going to be doing those kind of things. So I think your offense is going to be able to stay a little bit more on track. You've got guys that understand the coaching staff, understand what they're asking them to do. So I think there's just a lot more things that you like about this team compared to last year. And they're not winning because of turnovers. I think that's the other big thing is when you had that 5-game winning streak, they were getting turnovers at a pace that is impossible to keep. Like there's a lot of luck that goes into turnovers. And the Broncos got really lucky during that stretch. They're winning without turnovers. Mm-hmm. You know, and I know they got 2 this last game, but that's not the usual. Anything else you'd add to that one?
No, I mean, you hit on everything. The change with the defense up front, specifically for me, being able to get pressure without having to constantly blitz. And then the reliability in the secondary to where they can send those blitzes and play man, which is playing to Patrick Surtain's strength and leading to him having a really good season. The offensive line being a little bit more consistent. The only difference that I would say in a negative way from this team this year from last year is the run game just isn't there. But we have a quarterback who's doing better with, I mean, I was talking about how handling pressure is still the big hurdle, but he's still doing a significantly better job handling it than Russell Wilson did. And the offensive line's playing well. And what's more is they're working within the scheme instead of trying to work outside the scheme, as we saw with Russell Wilson. And then the historical defensive stretch of the defensive turnovers, that's historical for a reason. It's not something that you can rely on consistently, and them winning without it. That is the biggest difference to me between last year and this year.
And how would you answer that second question between Bo and Gardner Minshew? What's the difference there?
Well, when you were talking about those 1-year things, I remembered a lot of people crowning Mac Jones as the next Tom Brady after like the first 6 games. And it's always tough because you never know what's going to happen. You mentioned RG3 and the knee injury that occurred to him that really derailed his career that was off to a promising start. It's hard because you don't know what's going to happen. And obviously, I hope that Bo Nix is able to stay healthy and continue on this trajectory. But you just watch for consistent signs of growth that we're seeing from Bo Nix. That when I was watching Gardner Minshew way back when, Mac Jones, I wasn't seeing those. I wasn't seeing, this growth as a player with their technique, with how they're using the offense, how they're utilizing their weapons, like I'm seeing from Bo Nix this year. So that to me is one reason why I view this as a little bit differently than I do some of those other situations.
Yeah, I think you're seeing some of the veteran things that you like to see from a quarterback, like his pre-snap reads. He did that in college a lot with Oregon. They gave him the offensive line control. Hey, blitz is coming from here. Get that guy right there. Yeah. And you're seeing that he is understanding how teams are trying to come after him for the most part. And he's making the right call most of the time. And you don't usually see a rookie quarterback being asked to do those kind of things. So I think there's more sustainability with what he's bringing to the table. And I think added on to that, Mac Jones, not an athlete. Gardner Minshew, not an athlete. Bo Nix has at least that extra gear that allows him, when everything else breaks down, he can still go make a play with his legs. So I think there's some promising things there. I hate that idea that I could have egg on my face in the future because I said something like that. But no, I do. I think there's a lot of good things. The other big thing is he gets to keep his coach. Sean Payton's going to be here next year. Yeah. Mac Jones, didn't they fire the OC moved on? And then the next year they're like, hey, we don't need an offensive coordinator. We'll just have a couple coaches that kind of take on the offense and let's see what we can put together. Like, you just set that guy up for complete failure no matter what in that situation. So thankfully, Sean Payton, unless medical emergency happens, he's probably going to be the Denver Broncos coach next season.
Yeah, I mean, it's the continuity and everything, as you're saying, that goes into it as well. And not just that, I don't think he's at risk of, or not just having Sean Payton, I don't think he's at risk of losing Joe Lombardi as his offensive coordinator. The one concern that I am about the coaching staff around him is I think Davis Webb is on his way to an offensive coordinator position. There has been a lot linking him going to Detroit when the offensive coordinator in Detroit, Ben Johnson, inevitably leaves for a head coaching job. So hopefully Davis Webb is able to stay. But there's just a lot there about him leaning because there's a lot of reports. There's a lot of people talking about it, about how close Bo Nix is with Davis Webb.
Makes sense. And talking about consistency, we got Michael coming in saying, good evening, Carl and Eric on Building the Broncos. Go Bo Broncos. Go Michael. Thank you so much for coming in. Always showing off that Knicks number 10 jersey that I think they're going to be wearing this week. But also talking about something that we consistently have is Underdog. Underdog is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. Join over 5 million fans who are already playing on Underdog with their pick'em game. You could win money by making entries with your favorite players. Compete against other players just by selecting higher or lower on 2 or more players' stats. And you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog.
Yeah, with their champs game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on a player's stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Like, for example, will Bo Nix have higher or lower than 220.5 passing yards this week? Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose.
Download the Underdog app today and use code MHuddle to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Again, download the Underdog app today and use our code MHuddle to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Every player, every touchdown, just select higher or lower on Underdog.
Now, you must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, and 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
All right. So we do have a subject here for tonight, but before we get to that, I did want to get to Gary Palmer's comment here and Phil's as well. So we got Gary coming in saying, hi, Carl and Eric. One thing that doesn't show in the stats is the culture. Thanks, Sean. Go Bo, go Broncos. Yeah, I think people really do underestimate how much coaching matters in the NFL. We do the draft and free agency and all that kind of stuff, and we're saying, is this guy talented? Is he not? What can he do? What can he not do? All those kind of things. But if they go to a terrible situation, sometimes that talent isn't going to matter a whole lot. And so I do think for Bo Nix, he came to the perfect situation. He came to a coach that knew how to use him to his strengths, understood what they were getting in him, that, they're not going to get Caleb Williams with some of the crazy, crazy throws that he's going to make. But they understand they're going to get a guy that's smart. He's consistent. He's going to listen to the coaches. He's going to run the system that they want him to run. And then, like I said, having a culture that understands winning. Sean Payton, his worst season ever as a head coach is 7 wins. Mm-hmm. And I remember before the season started and people were telling him, hey, Vegas is saying that you're at 5.5 wins. And like he just was joking about it, like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And, PFF had him as the 31st or 32nd ranked roster, all those kind of things. But they really underestimated just how much the coaching, getting everything possible out of these players, matters compared to some other places. You look at the Jets, they have talent galore and they're a mess because ownership, GM, coach, all of that is not functioning well together. Yeah. Well, yeah, and Rodgers.
And as for showing stats or culture not showing up in the stats, I somewhat disagree here. I think it does. And I think it's showing up in the win-loss record of the Broncos this year. When you go back and you look at a couple of these games that they've won, those are games that they have lost in recent years. The way that this Raiders game was going, and even the first Raiders game, those were games that the Broncos have lost prior. I mean, in this one, yeah, they needed that interception, or in the first one, they needed that big pick six by Surtain to help light a fire under them, but they came back in a big way. In previous years, we've seen some of these big plays by the defense only get let down by the offense, and that's part of a talent difference as well. But this fight that this team has, the way that they came back against the Chargers, the way that they've come back and kept going and kept fighting through the end, that is a thing that is a culture change that we are seeing, and it's showing up in the stat sheet because for years the Broncos would just basically lay down and die for the opposing team once they got behind a little bit or were off to a rough start in the game.
I would even say, look at week 1 of this year. Mm-hmm. Like almost everything that could have gone right for the Broncos went right in that first half. And I kind of remember at halftime, like I was excited that they were winning, but I kind of still had that thought of, oh crap, like everything went our way and we're only up by like a couple points. What happens if one thing doesn't bounce our way in the second half?
Yep.
And now you look at this last week was pretty much the opposite of that. Like everything that could have gone right for the Raiders in the first half went right. You get a fake punt, you pick up some third downs that you probably shouldn't have picked up, those kind of things. And yet they were only up by 4 points. And I kind of reached that point. I'm like, I think Broncos are going to win this game.
Yeah.
Yes, everything's going the Raiders' way right now, but yet even with that, they're barely winning. So that I think it's a good sign of a team that's winning. And now we get to talk about our subject here for the night, coming from Phil with some stars saying, "Good evening, Carl, Eric, and Deacon Scott. Will Sanders, Reynolds, and Bidet be back this week? Hashtag Buckham, hashtag MHH for life, hashtag Broncos for life." Bidet, I don't think so. I haven't heard anything about them making any kind of moves with him. I don't think they've even opened up his window yet, have they?
They haven't, no.
So, yeah, I don't think he'll be back this week. Sanders, for sure, is going to be back this week. This was the last week for them to open up his window, or they opened his window. If they didn't put him on the 53-man roster this week, he would have to go to IR for the rest of the season. Yeah. Reynolds, I don't know because they have another week with him. So you could see them wait on him, and you could see them bring one of the linebackers up from the practice squad that are out of call-ups. So I don't think they want to lose those guys, if at all possible. They have been productive for the Broncos at different times. But I wanted to talk about this because Sanders, I think you and I both agree, his better position is not at edge. Yet it seems like the Broncos seem very set on that's where he's going to make his mark in the NFL. Why do you think that they keep thinking this is where he's going to thrive?
Betting on athleticism, but I mean, when you look at other edges, and obviously there's some exceptions to the rule, his athleticism isn't at those marks that you want for a pass rusher off the an edge rusher. It's I don't know. Like part of me thinks that it's them just kind of forcing it to happen, just because of, oh, we're doing fine at linebacker, and prior to the season even, we brought in all these guys at linebacker because back in February is when George and Sean Payton both were like, he's probably going to end up as an edge, and edge had a lot of question marks about it. So now I think they're just kind of stuck, I guess. And I don't know. Hopefully that they realize quickly that he's not an edge, or he completely proves us both wrong and ends up shining as an edge and just adds even more to the depth that they have at the position. So I'm not sure why they're so set on him being an edge.
I kind of wonder a little bit if this is the Baron Browning. He did pretty well at edge, other than the
Mhm.
injuries. And he was kind of one of those hybrid players. You weren't quite sure exactly where he was going to fit in the NFL. And they finally settled on edge, and he did well. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing they kind of think maybe we could do that with this guy too. But very different body types, very different setups. Baron Browning was very long,
Yeah.
had a decent ability to anchor, understood a little bit more, I think, on how to set up pass rush moves to go out there and win compared to Sanders. He's such a raw prospect right now,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of just like college. They didn't know where to put him there either.
Yeah.
Alabama had him at edge, but he wasn't doing great there, so he wasn't getting many snaps. Then he goes to Arkansas, and they move him back a little bit, and he did well, but a lot of that was him coming downhill, pretty much
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, go shoot the A gap and go make a play for us."
Yeah.
And I still think that's probably going to be his best bet in the NFL. I think of there was a linebacker for Tampa Bay. Why am I spacing his name right now? That's pretty much what they asked him to do. They pretty much just said, "Hey, you're going to go straight downhill. You're going to go blow up plays in the backfield," and he did great with it. Now it's a nice thing to have, but it limits you a little bit on what you can do on defense when you have to be going in that direction and they can't ask you to go backwards.
Yeah. And real quick, going back to Tyler Beatty, since that was part of the question from Phil, and I've seen a couple people asking about it. It's worth noting that when the Broncos activate Josh Reynolds, which is coming either this week or next week, that'll put them at, I believe, 6 activations off injured reserve. They only have 8 unless they make the playoffs, when they can get an extra 2. So I think that Beatty, I'm not sure if he'll be red or basically sit out this whole year. Back injuries, which is what he's dealing with, can be a little bit tricky. But I think they're just kind of waiting and seeing, do we lose somebody else for an injury that's going to keep him out for maybe 5 weeks? With us looking at being in the playoffs, as they have a hold on the 7th seed right now, and just wait on that and then see what happens there. So I think that just right now, reason why we haven't heard anything about on Tyler Bidet, not Beatty, Bidet, is just keeping their options open going forward. I hope they come back, because he was looking really good before he got hurt. But we'll see. So that's just kind of where it seems to be they're at.
I think the running backs, running wise, had probably one of their worst games of the season this last week.
Yeah.
It wasn't all their fault. Some of the offensive linemen missed guys. Vele missed a block on one that was really set up well to the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And if he made his block, I think it was going to be 15, 20 yards down the field before our running back got tackled. But yeah, Bidet, in his one big game, was the one guy that really showed some decent vision, showed that explosive ability. Once he hits the hole, like, he can go turn that into a really, really big play for you. So I'd love to see him back, but you're right. You don't want to rush those back injuries. It doesn't take much to retweak that, set him back even further. And you just hope maybe next year he could become one of those running backs for you, because good chance you're probably losing Javonte Williams. McLaughlin, I don't know if he'll be here beyond this season. I'm guessing they're looking to replace him, at least to some degree. And Estime, I think they like him, but I think they're still questioning a little bit of what they have in him, just because he hasn't been given many opportunities. And part of that's his own fault with the fumbles.
Yeah.
So, the running back room, it's going to be, I think, one of the bigger storylines of our offseason is, what is that group going to look like come next year? Because you said it earlier. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and tight end. I think that's the other one that is, I mean, the Broncos, they need a legit number 1 wide receiver. And I know that there's some who believe that Sutton is that guy. I think he's more of a high-end number 2. With Vele could potentially be a number 2, but I think he works best as a big slot, and we're seeing him use in such a way this season. And he's doing it quite well with it. They need a legit number 1 receiver, but the running back and tight end room, you basically have to not 100% remake them, but 90% turnover in those positions, because the 3 tight ends, they're not doing a great job. They're being Yes, they've had a few, each of them have had a couple plays here and there as a receiver, but they're not threats in the receiving game, which is such a big part of Sean Payton's offense. You need that legit tight end threat. You need that legit number 1 wide receiver. And you just got to find somebody who can be consistent in the backfield. And that's one of the most frustrating things for me when watching this running back room week in, week out. You don't know who it's going to be because none of them have shown the consistency from game to game of, hey, I can be this guy for this offense. Because one game they go have a great game, and the next game it's, why are you even on the field?
Yeah. I just keep thinking, really, to me right now, I mean, I know tight end room stinks, but I think you can kind of cover some of that up with how you're using your wide receivers and your running backs in the passing game. But having no run game, what would this offense be if they had a consistent run game? You look at, I was looking at something earlier, and it was talking about the 3 main running backs that changed teams this year: Barkley, of Jacobs, and King Henry.
Yeah.
Like the teams that let those guys go I don't think they've won 10 games on the season. And the 3 teams that got those guys, because now they have a really consistent run game, and it's not just because of them. Those teams were good before they got there. But still, like, it adds such an extra dynamic to their team that you have to prepare for. You know, I'm very thankful I had Josh Jacobs on my fantasy team this week. He scored 3 touchdowns for me. And although I still lost, dang it, because I went against Barkley, of all people, dang it. So, but like I said, if the Broncos could find a legit running back that could make teams have to respect the run game, it just opens up everything else. The play action becomes so much more. You know, where are you going to put your safeties? Are you going to stop the run game? You're going to take on the pass. And so, yeah, I'm really hoping, and thankfully, this is a great running back draft. Running back draft. Might be one of the best I've seen in a long time. And tight end as well. There's quite a few guys I really like. And some of it still depends on who comes out. You know, some of them are juniors, so they could go back for another year. But no, I think the Broncos stand a decent chance of adding to those 2 rooms and feeling much better about them heading into next season.
Yeah, and just you made the comment about it, and I had to search it about those 3 running backs. So those 3 running backs, Barkley, Jacobs, and King Henry. Last year, the teams they were on, they won a combined 20 games. They're at 7 combined wins. Those teams without them now. So yeah, I mean, having a reliable running back that you can rely on is such a difference maker for offenses, especially in an offense like Sean Payton's, where it's not a, I don't want to say it's not a huge part of the offense, but it's a significant part of the offense. As in it's used to open up so much, just like having that legit threat at tight end. And part of what they need to do at tight end too, it's not just receiving ability. Going back and watching some of these issues that they've had in the running game, it's like Nate Atkins missing a block. I mean, there was one against this game where he bet on Max Crosby taking the inside path and just completely whiffs on it. Adam Trotman is not, he's supposed to be the blocking tight end, and he's not that. Lucas Kroll is about as bad as Greg Dulcich, who the Broncos finally waived, and he landed with the New York Giants. So they need to find a legit tight end. And when I say that, not just as a receiver, they got to find somebody who can also be that blocking guy for them. Fortunately, there are multiple options in this draft. There's the kid out of Penn State and the kid out of Michigan, who a lot of people are linking both of them with the Broncos right now, talking of running backs, along with the Boise State running back.
And honestly, like, I know we talk about the value positions and not wanting to use a first round pick on running back or tight ends kind of thing. But especially if the Broncos are picking mid 20s, early 20s, some of that goes out the window a little bit. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a set in stone thing every single year. You can't take a running back prior to pick 15 or pick 20 or whatever, because you also have to evaluate the difference of the draft classes from year to year, as well as the difference in the strength of the positions from year to year. Jahmyr Gibbs was, I mean, and then individual things like Jahmyr Gibbs was more than just a running back. And I think, and I was one of them, and I'll admit it, I was one of those that, I don't want to say underestimated the receiving ability. We just didn't value it as much, and just, hey, he's a running back who can be like Christian McCaffrey out of the backfield. But running backs, once you get after that off that rookie contract, they tend to struggle a little bit more. And so it's just a thing of every single year, you just got to reevaluate. So yeah, when you're picking in the early 20s, mid 20s, late teens, wherever the Broncos end up, and to me that's a range at this point, yeah, you kind of throw it out the window, especially when you break down these players individually. Loveland and Warren, I think, is the Penn State tight end.
Yep.
Both those guys are guys that I think will be good value there in the 20s. And the Boise State running back's name escapes me at
Genty.
the moment. Yeah, he's a guy that we could be seeing him go in the top 10 because of how good of a season he's having and what he can do. So yeah, it's not a set in stone thing of positional value, as some like to act like it is.
Well, and I know Sean Payton has talked about taking the Detroit path, to how they're building their team. And Detroit, I mean, like you said earlier, taking Gibbs there at, I think it was 12 overall.
And then a linebacker.
Yeah, then taking a linebacker, and you're kind of going, well, that was a waste. They had 2 first-round picks, and this is what they do with it. But both those guys have been impact players for them. So it's a matter, if you get impact players, it doesn't matter as much the position. Now, if you're top 10, I'm going to care a lot more about the positional value because, you take a guard top 5, they better be Hall of Fame level to justify that position. Same with running back. But yeah, mid 20s, early 20s, wherever the Broncos end up picking, having a tight end that can be multiple for your team, like a Tyler Warren. He's probably my favorite tight end right now. Just the way that Penn State uses him. I mean, he's been a running back for them at times, played center for them. He played punter for them this year. I mean, he's kind of done a little bit of everything. And I kind of feel like that's Sean Payton likes those guys that he can kind of move around and come up with some creative things of how to use them and really turn them into something good. So I think, and Loveland is the other one. I think he'd be a great one too. Very athletic. I think he can go make some great plays for the Broncos. And Sean Payton is one of those guys. He would know how to use them right off the bat. I think it's part of the problem with a lot of tight ends that come in. They go to not great situations, maybe don't have a quarterback to throw to them. Even like Brock Bowers this year, he's having a great season, even with not having great quarterback play. And I think part of that is also tight end position has changed a lot over the years. It's not taken as long to get them going as it was in the past. So I think either of those positions for the Broncos in the first round, depending on the player they pick, I wouldn't have too big of a problem with.
Yeah, there's a good comment here from Douglas Wall that is fun to talk about. Can't a wide receiver be a tight end? I don't know about you guys on Tuesday nights, but throughout, post draft up until September, on Friday nights, we kept being asked about moving Devon Bailey to tight end. So we had a lot of conversations about this. Moving a wide receiver to tight end isn't easy. And the times that you do see it happen, it's often with wide receivers who are 230 plus pounds. The average size for weight for a tight end is 200 and I think 47.5 pounds. I did the math before during one of the shows over the season. So that's still a lot of weight. Most wide receivers, they're coming in under 220 pounds. It is a huge adjustment for their body to make them to a tight end. You typically see guys who are basically receiving, what's the right word here? Big slot wide receivers make that move to tight end because they're already at 230 plus pounds at 6'3", 6'4", and it's just a little bit easier to transition them inside to be a tight end.
Yeah, and not saying that it can't happen because I see a couple comments here saying like Shannon Sharp was both. There's been plenty of other guys that have been, like I said, wide receiver, tight end kind of hybrid thing. It's just not the norm.
Yeah,
it's not something you can depend on and say, hey, Bailey, put on 30 pounds this offseason. We're going to move you to tight end, and it's going to be great. It's probably not going to be. Not saying it can't work, just saying I really would not bank on that. And like I said, this is a great tight end class. Somebody put in here the Ferguson from Oregon, reuniting with with Bo Nix here. He's not had the best season by any means compared to what he had last year, but another good tight end. There's plenty of names out there. We'll get more into it when we get closer to offseason and draft talk and stuff like that. We'll break down the entire tight end class. And I think you'll be very happy that the Broncos will have multiple opportunities. If they don't go first round, there's going to be some guys in the second, third, fourth, fifth round that you're still going to like. It's one of the few positions that I can sit there and say, like, you can get a starter not in the first round. This is not a deep draft, but there's a couple positions that are.
Yeah, and also worth remembering as we get closer to it, and we'll talk about this more later, is Sean Payton loves to move up. He loves to move up in the draft, and so it's if they really want Loveland or Warren or the Boise State running back, then I could see them trading up in the first round to go get it. Not what I would do, but I'm not the head coach of the team. And like my opinion, and Sean Payton obviously knows more than I do. If I've ever come off like I pretended otherwise, I've tried not to. But no, I mean, he knows what he needs on this offense. He knows what he's missing, and he loves to move around the draft, primarily moving up.
And talk about moving up, we got Cody W coming in with a super chat here saying, I'd almost bet Sean goes for a wide receiver running back for the Joker role in the first round. He talks about needing one in the press conference all the time. I mean, it'd be great to find that kind of player, and he's found those types in the past. Genty, I think he's a decent receiver. I wouldn't call him a great receiving back. They haven't really used him as much in that kind of role there at Boise State this year. I don't think there's another running back that I would say I would take in the first round, maybe late first, into the first. You got Omar from UNC is another really good one. You got the two OSU running backs that are going to be, I think a lot of guys are going to like. But yeah, no, I mean, he does. He wants a running back that can be multiple because he doesn't want to give away what he's going to run on a certain play.
Yeah.
There's certain running backs, I love Derrick Henry, but usually when he's in, you kind of know, like, they're probably running the football.
Or he's going to stay in the block.
Yeah. Philip Lindsay, when he was here with the Denver Broncos, we talked about this a lot. I loved Philip Lindsay as a running back, but he just was not a great receiving option. That's why he's not in the NFL anymore. If he was a great receiving option with the way that he ran the football, like, that guy would have been around the NFL for a very long time, barring injuries. But he couldn't catch very well. And if you can't depend on him in those kind of situations, then teams can ignore you and say, okay, you're sending 5 guys out, but you're really only sending 4 because we don't have to worry about this guy. So, but anyway, well, guys, I know Erick's got to get out of here, and I know everybody's probably getting time with their family. And I've got to get to a KU Duke basketball game to watch tonight. I'm pretty sure that's going on. So I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys, the stars and the super chats coming in. We got David, we got Michael Ronquillo, we got David Cromwell as well. We got Gary Palmer, Phil McLaughlin, Cody W. Thank you guys all for coming in and supporting the show. Make sure if you can, guys, go over there, like, subscribe, and share on YouTube. We really do appreciate that. That helps us just as much as anything else. We appreciate the super chats, but that getting us out there. And we got Michael coming in saying, great show tonight. Carl and Eric on building the Broncos. Go Bo Broncos. Happy Thanksgiving to you there, Michael. And we got BNS as well coming in saying, aloha, boys. Can't wait for Drew, #AllProBowls. Yeah, Bowles having himself another great season. Really turning it up. I think he gave up 0 pressures in this last game. So good to see from him, and working himself into either a big contract with the Broncos or a big contract with somebody else at this point. So Great to see that. I know some people ask about the offensive tackle class. We'll get into that. Not a great one, unfortunately. That's probably why you want to get Bulls locked up. And we got Douglas Wall coming in, $5 super, saying, just supporting us. Thank you very much there, Douglas. Appreciate it. So again, thank you guys just for being here. Eric, thanks for joining last minute, man. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's good to talk Broncos football. I'm glad to be here. Glad to see some faces that we don't typically see on Friday nights very often. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving. And as a reminder, I won't be on the Dove Valley Deep Divers for the next 2 Fridays, just because of family stuff that I have going on. But tune in anyways. I believe Dylan Von Arx is going to be joining my co-host Kenneth Booker on those. And I'm sure it'll be a fun conversation. But thank you all for tuning in. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Happy Thanksgiving. And thank you, Carl, for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Always good to have you. Scott, thanks for the work in the background. Again, happy Thanksgiving and go Broncos.